Good morning, and thank you everyone for joining our CFO Roundtable, the evolution of the financial leadership. We have several people joining today, and we want to give it a couple of minutes to let everyone join. As you are joining, feel free to come online via video, and we'll give it a couple minutes for a couple more folks to go ahead and join. And while we wait for them, I do want to thank all of you for joining today. We have a very dynamic set of panelists to discuss some topics with you today. So we're very excited to have you here today. We want to share with you a couple housekeeping things. Is one, please put any questions that you may have in the chat group, as we want this to be interactive and engaging. And we would like to try to get to all of your questions. In the event we cannot get to your questions, we will follow up with the Mission AWS team and either answer your questions directly and or connect you with one of the CFO panelists to answer your questions. And we're waiting on a couple more participants, so we will give it maybe another minute or so and wait for those participants to join. And you know, one thing I did want to share with everyone that is here right now, and I'll reiterate this later, but I'm really excited to have you all here. I'm really excited to have the panelists that we have. We have some great companies here to speak to you. We have Mission, OneVigor, Stretto, WillPro. We're extremely excited about the content we're going to share, and this is the beginning of a series of conversations that we want to have with the Office of the CFO. We are hoping to try and build a community around some of these topics and around this office. And so we're very excited to have everyone participate. We're going to go ahead and begin. And as we step through and today, I want you to meet your panelists. So panelists, I'm going to start with you, Stuart. Please provide us with an intro of your company and also give us a little bit of background on your current role.
Excellent. Hey, everyone. Lovely to meet you. My name is Stuart Armstrong, and I'm the CFO and the COO at Mission. So for those of you that don't know, Mission is a trusted managed service cloud provider and an AWS Premier consulting partner that works with businesses that are either using or migrating to Amazon Web Services. So Mission delivers really a unique breadth and depth of AWS recognized technical and strategic proficiencies. You know, we help businesses architect, migrate, manage, and optimize their AWS cloud environments. We also help businesses tap into the vast potential of their data that is on AWS, and we help accelerate back-ended transformation of their data using our data analytics and machine learning practice. So like I mentioned, I currently hold the role of CFO and COO here at Mission. So the departments that roll up under me are accounting and finance, of course. I'm also responsible for business operations, legal, and cloud foundation, which also includes our AWS resale business, because obviously there's a ton of metrics that sort of go into that in terms of how you optimize what it is that you do in the cloud. I'm currently located in Los Angeles, and as Syesha mentioned, I'm looking forward to this forum. I think creating a forum over time that allows CFOs to sort of just talk openly about the challenges that we face is an exciting place to be, and I'm excited to learn.
Well, thank you, Stuart. Going to pivot over to you, Melissa.
That's actually a subsidiary now last year, but that's the when we merged last year, it's with Chimney Group. We're a technology
Melissa, I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm not sure if everyone else is.
Yes, and Melissa, while you kind of get your volume situated, let's move maybe to Chris with Will Pros for an introduction, but it is a bit challenging to hear you.
Yeah, hello all, and let me know if you can't hear me as well. But Chris Krajcic with Wheel Pros, CFO. I joined the company in late 2016. We're a leading aftermarket vehicle enhancement company. We have locations predominantly in the US, some in Canada. We just launched in UK and then also in Australia. We're focused more on the aftermarket wheels, tires, and the accessories in the lift and leveling kit space. And we've had the pleasure and the challenges of over the last handful of years since 2016, organically and through M&A, we've grown from about a $350 million company in 16 to just under $1 billion company in 2020. So looking forward to discussing all the topics with the group.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Kyle, I'm going to pivot to you.
Sure. Thanks, Syesha. Hello, everybody. Happy to be here today. My name is Kyle Koval. I'm the CFO of Stretto, a company that I joined about a year and a half ago. Stretto, for those who aren't familiar, is a leading provider of case management software, legal and financial services to both attorneys and trustees within the bankruptcy ecosystem. The company's been around for 30 years, but has really gone through a transformation the last 3 years from being a single monoline business to really a dynamic organization with what we like to call 3.5 businesses at the moment, but growing very rapidly. We are headquartered in Irvine. We've got locations across the country. So just excited to be here with everybody, and nice to meet you all.
Excellent. Thank you, Kyle. And Melissa, were we able to?
Yeah,
Right.
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, there we go. I called on my phone. Sorry about that, guys. So basically, I don't know how much you guys all heard, but we have OneVigor merged with Chimney last year. And so I manage US finance for this entity, as well as a number of other roles. But Chimney is a creative company, Vigor's technology. And so we enable long form broadcast distribution on the technology side. Chimney creates content. And so basically we're going to get to a space of creative asset optimization for multinational brands as we continue to deploy the platform globally. And so my role specific to US finance, as well as HR, administrative, legal, I'm the ISO 27001 ISMS manager, and I'm leading the global NetSuite deployment. So I'm merging more into a global finance role, and hopefully pushing off HR into the operations team where the rest of HR is managed. But it's an interesting transition that we're going through as we go through all the growing pains you would expect when you merge a creative company and a technology company.
Thank you, Melissa. And we definitely want to dive into that a little bit later in the conversation here. I want to welcome the folks that have just joined. So welcome. And again, thank you for joining the CFO Roundtable. My name is Syesha Thompson. I will be your moderator. I am a sales leader here at AWS, and I'm excited to help moderate this event. As we step through the event itself, we will be discussing 5 key topics, if time permits. The first, the blended role of the financial leader, how financial leadership plans to support customers and employees in 2021. We will talk to the innovative ways financial leadership is using cloud technology to drive the business, and how data, analytics, and visualization provides more insights to drive business decisions. And finally, we want to have a conversation around diversity and inclusion and what SMB is doing about it. Now, we will try to touch all these subjects, but in the event we are not able to, we will follow up. As I said, this is the beginning of many events that we want to have with you all. So we're going to begin and start with the blended role of the financial leader. Melissa, I'm going to turn to you on this one and ask you this question first. How has your role of the as a financial leader evolved over the past 12 months?
Yeah, so the since we've gone through a merger, it's been a little bit different than I think a lot of other companies where the financial leader is probably taking on a more diverse role given COVID and all the impacts of the business. And so my role is actually focused a little bit more. So I was able to, after we went through the merger, I pushed off manufacturing and IT for my role. And so it has been a little bit more focused, but then I picked up the New York and LA operations for the creative side, right? So I switched out more operations with more of a focus on finance and helping the creative side in the US make sure their books are in order and get some better forecasting given the dynamic market conditions. The creative side was hit as most service-based businesses were. And so there was a lot of work that went into while we had a reprieve from a lot of activity cleaning up. But that has been probably a big difference between my role and a lot of other roles is it actually narrowed a little bit, but I would say it's still quite expanded compared to most other finance roles because it is really a blend of finance and operations. And it brings I think a lot of value to the conversation. But at times I'm sure everyone else is like, oh, Melissa knows everything we're doing. I'm like, yes, I do. Right. And so it is great from that perspective, being in finance and knowing all aspects of the technology side and the creative side.
Excellent. Stuart, I want to turn to you as you officially have two roles as a CFO and COO. Help me understand kind of how your roles have evolved and what does that mean for you to manage both hats and wear both hats?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, so both hats today, all the opportunities that I've been involved in have actually started with CFO and then morphed into including the addition of the COO title. Just stepping back super high level, I think the role of the CFO really has changed over time, right? Gone are the days where you can really live in a silo that is accounting and finance. It's morphed into you need to understand operations, right? Building financial models is a relatively easy thing to do. We all do it, right? The challenge is the inputs into that model, right? And often those inputs are all centered in operations, right? So being able to sort of broaden, what you cover to make sure that you truly understand the business, which again is more than just accounting and finance, I think is super valuable. You work with the individual departments, you make them feel that they are individual contributors when you're talking about hiring plans, processes, tools, have them be a part of what that input is, own those inputs that are then in the financial plan, right? So over time, my role has morphed to include that. And I think when you think about how to efficiently run a business, you have to do that.
Excellent. Thank you, Stuart. And then you mentioned a couple of things that we're going to dive into a little bit, speaking about data, talking about how you kind of leverage operations and other peers. Kyle, I want to pivot to you because I know you've done this pretty well in your role and have partnerships with other lines of business. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I think, to build on kind of what Melissa and Stuart said, I think having a deep understanding of the business and not just, producing financial reports or, numbers that people rely on, it's really partnering with those business leaders and really understanding what they need assistance with or what they need help with so that you can be a value-added business partner. And, what we are trying to do or in the process of doing is really, trying to get as much information as quickly as possible into the hands of those that need to make those business decisions so that they have that information readily available to them. They trust the information that's being provided to them. And really, kind of Stuart mentioned, bringing them along in the process and making sure that they feel like they're part of the process, whether that's building their budgets or it's a partnership, not just, finance telling them, here are your numbers, take it or leave it.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Chris, going to pivot to you. Maybe talk to us a little bit about your role, how it has evolved, how you partner with other lines of business in your current role.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, and similar to others, definitely heavily involved in HR, legal, real estate, and as it relates to more of the data structure and data sources and that front, my role is kind of more or less the glue that's holding the different components together. We have the luxury to see what's important to the various groups, what information they need. And so we can work with the IT team, with the data team, and make sure that when we set up our attributes, our data structures, that it's going to support the entire business. So, data has been our biggest internal investment over the last 18 months in reporting. And I think the CFO role, in my particular role, has been trying to manage the expectations of the company in the future and what each individual department needs in order to support the growth and the initiatives that we have going forward.
Excellent. I like what you said there. The CFO and the Office of Finance is the glue. I think one of the things I know everybody online, and I would like to know, is how do you guys build those relationships, right? You say be the trusted advisor. You say provide them with data. How are you guys building those relationships today? How do you earn that trust with the other lines of business? And maybe start with you, Chris.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that has led to success for me personally here at WheelPros is trying to ask questions first versus just looking at a bottom line and demanding results. Because I think we were joking in some of the earlier discussions prior to this meeting that everything works out in Excel. That's my favorite quote with the executive operations team. And if you take the mentality where you're just focused on the bottom line, there's going to be headbutting to get there. And if you're more focused on the path and the journey that the operators that are driving the business, working with the customers on a daily basis, the struggles they see, and how we can work backwards to improve that process, I think you get a lot more buy-in in trying to drive results when you just don't look at a spreadsheet and give them a number and say, go make it happen.
What about you, Kyle? How do you build that trust?
Yeah, I would echo really what Chris said there. I'm very fortunate that I work with some really, really bright people that operate our business lines. And, I think coming to the table, seeking knowledge from them to better understand their business rather than coming to the table and telling them how it's going to be. When you don't have that full understanding, and they will clearly know when you don't have that full understanding. So try not to represent that. And just learning and seeing where you can fit in to add value to their process, or you can make their life a little bit easier. Like, oh, hey, you have somebody over here that's generating a report that they produce for you on a regular basis. Well, actually, I think finance could really, maybe do that a little bit more efficiently and, maybe get it out to you a little bit quicker. So, finding ways that you can add value to their process and, take things off their plate. It can be a little bit of a Trojan horse because that way, finance gets to control the flow of information. So I'm a little bit selfish in that regard, but it does, try, the real goal is to try to make their lives a little bit easier and let them focus on what they do really well.
Excellent. And Stuart, you're wearing two hats. So I know, the CFO and the CEO are already tightly joined at the hip at Mission, but how do you build a trust with some of your other lines of business and grow those partnerships?
Yeah, great. I sort of touched on this a little. Obviously, making people feel that they are individual contributors in the process, I think, is key. But going one step further, it's not just about numbers and cents, right? It's about what's the long-term strategy, right? But for us, it's with a focus specifically on the customer, right? So we do a lot of things every day, but at the end of the day, mission success will be measured on that customer experience. So how was that service provided? What did that customer really think? And what's interesting is that becomes very, very important and very central to how we run our business. And a lot of that has nothing to do with numbers and cents. Ultimately it translates into that, but managing a world-class experience where we deliver defensible, essential services to the customer, that's an ops thing. And then finance's role is how do we support an end result, right? So that is, how do we deliver on funding for that? How do we make available tools for that? We have to figure it out, right? And I think when the company sees that you are sitting in both of those camps and really driving that world-class service to our customers, that's acknowledged, right? And then we go one step further and we say, let's talk about it, right? So as a company, I'm responsible for saying, what are our KPIs for the quarter, right? And those KPIs cut across the entire company, right? And there are opportunities for everyone to sort of move the ball forward by being an individual contributor. And guess what? All of those are inputs into a financial model, right? So when you rally around something as a company, it's a very powerful thing. And I think it's required in the CFO role.
And Melissa, you have your hands in quite a bit of different roles, as you mentioned. For you, you're actually starting to narrow down some of the functions and the responsibilities that you have. Help me understand, and maybe help everyone on the call to understand, how are you building those relationships? How do you manage those non-finance functions that report up through you today?
Yeah, there's definitely in a global organization that we have, that's where I'm having to dance that fine line between what's in the United States and what's in the region versus what's global, and then the different departments. And what I've found, both operating locally as well as operating globally, is understanding, here's our 2 and 5 year plan, what's being asked of this department, and then what's being asked of the department head, and then understanding what that the people in those leadership roles, what they seem to want for their career goals. So like it's been said by the other CFOs, it's asking questions, it's figuring out what they're looking for. And by understanding what the company's goals are, and then what these individuals' goals are and their departments are, it's a lot easier to figure out what favor you can do to help them out, right? So to take something off their plate, maybe something that they aren't even aware of, where you say, hey, this is around the corner. Let me create this report for you, do this analysis for you, because I see this as an impediment to us being successful, right? So it's creating more recurring meetings, it's creating group chats in teams involving the right stakeholders, right? Where we're sharing information, making sure there's regular communication, making sure there's enough stakeholders in the meetings, while always having that side conversation of understanding how many different ways that department lead is being pulled to be able to make sure you can partner effectively with them, right? Because otherwise it's just finance asking for information to make reports. And that's the way it always ends up being if you don't build enough a relationship with them that they actually feel like they're partnering with you, versus finance is asking. Like that's all what it always comes down to, is making sure that they know that you know what their goals are and that you care.
And it sounds like from all of you all, a couple of big themes I'm hearing is, one, you have to earn the trust of those different lines of business. And it's starting with data, right? And it's starting with inviting them in and having partnerships. And I think, Chris, you mentioned it, having a relationship with them, understanding what's important to them. I think that's so important. And we're going to dive into how you collect that data and what you're doing with that data a bit later. I want to pivot the conversation a bit to, everyone was impacted by COVID last year. And as a financial function, you have to support your customers differently in 2020. Talk to me how you all not only supported your customers differently in 2020, but also how you were able to extend your workforce to a work from home workforce. Maybe, and I'll start with you, Chris, share with us how you guys are supporting your customers in lieu of the pandemic.
Yeah, and for us, it was definitely a challenge because we're distribution, right? We're selling wheels, and so that's not something you can do from your basement office. So it was a combination of one, culturally making sure that there's a unity between the folks that have to be in the warehouses, moving and picking packages and getting it to the customers, and the folks that had the ability to be remote and work from home. And so I think you didn't want to, it kind of dovetails into the later topic of diversity. You didn't want to create any differences just because of who could do what from where. So one, there was a lot of focus on the safety, from cleaning procedures, from notifications if someone was ill at a location, shutting it down, cleaning it with fogging machines. So we invested in a lot of SOPs and discussions on how to keep the folks that had to be in the warehouses safe. And then we had the IT infrastructure. Aftermarket wheels space isn't that advanced on technology. So we definitely had the hiccups on folks that had to work from home, from VPN access, et cetera, that we've we've made, leaps and bounds from file sharing, how that structure is. So we spent had a bumpy road in getting people access. We were doing things in shifts because we didn't have enough VPN. So it was really focused on unity between warehouse workers and folks that could work remotely, focus on safety, and then getting the IT infrastructure in place to allow folks to work from home and keep people safe.
Thank you, Chris. So I know that it has been a challenge for all companies. So thank you for sharing that. Stuart, going to pivot to you and how Mission supported its staff as we pivoted.
Yeah, great. For us, we were 50% remote ahead of all of this happening. So it wasn't such a big change for us to go 100% remote. We already were standardized on tools that a distributed team would use. So it was really just sort of embracing that across the whole company. So yeah, it was a challenge, but it was a relatively easy transition for us to make. We had traditional brick and mortar, right? So we had office locations, West Coast, East Coast. We made a business decision to look at those, look at the pandemic, made some assessment around how long we thought this was going to last, and we made changes to the business. And one of those was to actually exit, those leases. But what we did do is we took that investment that we would make in those leases and we effectively redistributed that to our team, right? So we invested in the team, because I go back to this all the time, right? The success of Mission is what the customers think, right? And we had to make sure that that service could still be delivered to customers in a seamless, professional way. So we invested very heavily in getting our people set up in their home offices and giving them the basic infrastructure around that. So, we effectively redirected that rent expense to our people, which I think is the right thing to do. So we didn't look at it as, wow, this is an opportunity to save. It was an opportunity for us to figure out how do we solve for delivering world-class service remotely, because if this ever happened again, we have to be able to have an answer to it. And I think it's mission critical for our business.
And Melissa, how did you all solve for supporting your staff, especially being such a global company? Help us understand how you supported your staff in this transition.
Yeah, so the technology team, mostly based out of San Diego, but we have some remote workers. It was already capable of operating fully remote. That has just been the direction we had gone, right? Our entire infrastructure basically is in AWS, and having all the networking set up, having multiple DevOps employees to make sure that that's working, and IT staff with deep knowledge, as well as the CTO. So we were set up for that. On the creative side, it was a little bit more of a struggle. Luckily, most of the people are in Sweden, so they didn't work remotely. They continued to be in the office, going about their day-to-day in the Swedish way we found during COVID. But in the United States, there was definitely a little bit of a struggle, and there's a few people that did continue going into the office because that's where the creative suite is, with the high-powered PCs with the specific software on it. Trying to work remotely was a little bit of an issue. We did end up ordering, not a plug for AWS, but we did end up ordering some device that's specifically meant for media, trying to explore different ways to enable our creatives to work better remotely. So that has been a little bit of a struggle, but the ability to work in the Microsoft environment where we have teams, just saying, hey, put up your picture, have a Monday stand-up, right? So our tech side, we have a Monday company stand-up. That's the way we tried to create the support for the people. It's not just supporting them technology, it's supporting them where there's a Friday happy hour, a Monday stand-up, making sure that people don't feel really isolated. That's one of the bigger things that we focused on once the technology part was nailed down.
And Kyle, how are you all supporting people remotely today?
Yeah, I think, similar to what Melissa just mentioned, it was first, let's pivot, let's get everybody set up. That went relatively smoothly. I think the challenge that we then recognized as a management team was, well, how do we make sure that everybody stays engaged, everybody feels connected as an organization, and what type of things can we do to drive that engagement without making it feel overly manufactured. And so we've done a number of social Zoom related things that have been relatively successful, just in terms of, we did a company-wide trivia night, and it wasn't required. It was for people that wanted to do it. And so you get all of your extroverts that definitely want to do it, and your introverts that are kind of like 50-50. It was great. People worked in teams with people that they don't normally work with. And, especially, in this environment, that you don't really get to see on a day-to-day basis, around the office. And then, the other challenge that we've had is, onboarding new employees that, they come to the office that very first day. They get their computer, and then they're sent back, on their way home and try to figure it out. And, there's so much that is learned by a new employee just from being around the office, being from other people in the office, and, trying to figure out ways to get them exposure to those other things so they can really understand the business, which we've already talked about, from a finance perspective is critical. So, we, try to, have more meetings where, I know people get Zoom fatigue, but if you have a new employee that you think can benefit, maybe they're not necessarily, required for that meeting, but bringing them along to try to get them engaged and drive that deeper understanding of the business.
Yeah, and I think you guys are all bringing up two very critical points. One is it's not just technology. You're not just thinking about how do you support your teams, get them computers, laptop, Melissa, high-powered machines, but you're also talking about culture. How do you maintain your culture with their work from home or remote environment? And Kyle, Melissa, it was very interesting that you guys bring that up, as that's something that we're heavily prideful here at AWS about our culture. So it's great that to hear that you guys are not only supporting your teams remotely with technology, but also trying to maintain the culture that have made all of your businesses highly successful today. I do we have a question from the audience from Jim Bowen. And his question is, for companies undergoing organic growth, how do you forecast and plan for new locations with little to no prior history? And is there more complexity with supply chain distributions from last year's, or disruptions from last year's, excuse me. So I think the question is two-part. One is, how are you guys planning and forecasting for this next coming year with little to no information or no history? And so I'll pause there first.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to jump in, because this is something that, unfortunately I don't have a great answer, but I can tell you the struggles we faced, because we've done it two ways. When we look to put more dots on the map, new locations, we've done it in a way where you estimate the month, you estimate, the cannibalization of one territory that's going to feed into the new location. But what we found as a struggle is nothing ever happens exactly as planned, and our folks are highly compensated on their commission. So at a particular location. So then if you budgeted down and adjusted their commission rate up a little bit, then you didn't open a new location, you kind of, they got the, uptick there. Vice versa, if you didn't budget that and a new location opened and their territory got shrunk, their compensation was hurt. So, what we found was, do it more real time. No one's an expert guesser. So we said, here's our overall plan with our existing footprint. We have a goal to open 4 locations, in 2021. And with that, when we get about 3 months out, then we'll start having those real-time conversations and reforecasting that specific territory and pushing that out, and then looking at compensation plans and adjusting it there. So it's a little bit of more of a hybrid of having the overarching plan, knowing kind of where those dots on the map might be. And then once you get in that 90-day, 120-day out period, then you reforecast at those individual P&Ls and move forward. It's kind of how we approached it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to chime in there as well. So that's outstanding. We do exactly the same. But I feel that in this role, the CFO has really had to step up, right? And step up in the area of, what do we do based on data, right? So the CFO is really kind of shepherding through the storm here as such. Mission is a very data-driven company. We create this concept of best view, which is effectively, obviously historical actuals, and then, knowing that, how does that change your forecast, right? Because the budget is right for a day, and then you throw it away, and then it's, right, what's actually happening in the business. So whatever tools that you can set up to facilitate that sort of real-time planning becomes so very key. We call it our best view. It's effectively a rolling forecast, and we update it every week. Now that's pretty aggressive, right? But we use it as a tool to figure out weekly which direction do we need to go in based on our data, right? So it's all about how do we analyze data, which runs on AWS and what does it all mean, right? And how do we want to pivot the business based on what that is? So we don't have effectively locations that are distributing inventory, but we do have headcount that is very distributed, right? And it's all about sourcing the right headcount, which is expertise based, right? And that can be anywhere in the world. For us, growing the business organically, our customer acquisition cost is actually very attractive. So we would opt to always do that versus acquire. But we do probably at some point we certainly modeled in that there's some complement of our team that may go back to having some sort of physical presence, but it has to be very closely aligned with why, right? Now, obviously, if you're distributing a product, that's a reason, right? Or if you have to be in a specific territory or region for something, there's a reason there. But right now, we don't have anything super compelling that would require that.
And Kyle, what about you?
Yeah, I would say, especially the pandemic has been really, really fun for CFOs when it comes to forecasting, because it's presented just so many different challenges. For us, I think, when the pandemic struck, we had to pivot completely off what was then our budget to, what was reality. And, we have one business line that is very sensitive to interest rates, and you had interest rates go from 2% to 0 pretty much overnight. And so we had to quickly understand what was the impact, what was the driver, what does that mean for the remainder of the year and the plans that we have. Luckily we have 3 different businesses that, have very different sensitivities. And, one business was, going to be taking off as a result of this, our claims agent business dealing with large companies that are going through the bankruptcy process. And then we have other businesses that were hurt drastically, on the consumer bankruptcy side, where, consumer bankruptcy filings dropped by 35% due to all the government programs and stimulus and so forth. So what we really had to do is be nimble. And, to Stuart's point, you have to understand, what are the drivers. And, we learned a lot of lessons over the process, but I think, the key is really having the ability to do scenario forecast. And, if this happens, then the result will look like this. And then, updating that viewpoint on a regular basis is critical. We also, we launched a couple of products last year, and one of them we were spot on our forecast. We nailed it. And the other one we were completely wrong on our forecast. And, so you can't take credit for one without the other. But I think that the critical thing is really, taking that deep look in as to why were you so wrong with this other product as opposed to that product. And, I think really understanding, what does it take in terms of customer adoption to sign up for this product and make a change? That's kind of what became the critical difference for us. And so the more you can understand from those mistakes that you make, it'll make your process that much better going forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Melissa, you are a global company, and I know you all has had some difficult times or with forecasting. Maybe walk us through what you guys do and what has changed because of COVID.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've had to explore, right, whether you consider it organic growth or not, is how do you, like the question that was posed in the chat, how do you deal with that you can't see around the corner? And like everyone's speaking to, you have to be agile You have to get as much information as possible, and then you have to test those assumptions as you go, right? You have to revisit it. So setting a 12-month budget for whether it's a line of business or a location just isn't going to work. So on our side, there's reaching out for anything that we're going to be deploying, anything we're expanding. We have to talk at length with the technology team and then make sure they understand the different scenarios that are coming around. So one by one, you have to make sure they understand those, and then you have to revisit it with them, because as those scenarios change, it could significantly change what their cost forecast is, which is one of the hugest, given this day and age, that's one of the largest areas for a lot of businesses to assess when you're looking at budgeting. And then partnering with the sales and marketing team, right? Figuring out what opportunities there are going to be. And so I think, and then finally, making sure you're touching base with those stakeholders. And that's where the iterative discussions are about how much are we willing to invest, what loss are we willing to take, and then going back to it. Because given the circumstances that we're in, it changes. And you can't just have one, they said this was the sales forecast, they said this was our costs that we're going to have for the technology, and then the stakeholder said they're willing to invest this. You should revisit that every few months because there's so many different moving pieces. So that's the way we've taken a lot of the business forecasting. Is you, like, the outside investor really wants a 12-month budget, but then you say, that's just in contract, right? There's not actually a 12-month budget, but this is what we expect to do, worst case. And they said, okay, right? That's the reality of it. So.
All of you guys are mentioning data is kind of at the crux of what you're doing, whether that is trying to forecast for a month and Stuart, in your case, every week, and revisiting that. Can you guys talk to us, and I'm going to start with you, Chris, on how you're using data analytics to help you, and even data visualization to help you in some of this forecasting and communicating with different lines of business. How are you getting the data in? What are some of the critical data points that are important to you?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, data infrastructure, reliability, this has been our biggest investment over the last 18 months. With our growth, it's become critical. And we just had the discussion yesterday of, historically we've budgeted by kind of product category, wheels, tires, accessories. But we've been acquisitive. We've purchased different brands and different segments, and we're just talking about, okay, in 2022, we probably have to start budgeting by brands. It might not be every brand, but in some of the key brands that we've purchased that, for example, Gorilla Lug Nuts, to draw attention to that and budget at a warehouse is going to be more critical to drive success. And so where that ties into the data, in order to budget at that granular level, you're going to need the historical trends and understand, where SKUs have gone, and which brands instead of just wheels, tires, accessories. Additionally, from a manufacturing standpoint, we're diversifying out of China. Basically, 90% of our products are made in China. We're diversifying both in U.S. manufacturing. We've invested there, and then also in different countries, primarily in India. And so when we use data analytics, now it's down to the SKU level of who's manufacturing it, because they have different components from ocean freight, from domestic freight. Tariffs obviously is a big thing for us. And so the data analytics at that level is needed in order to make awareness of, okay, if a product's coming from US manufacturing, our margin should be X. If it's coming from China, it should be Y. And so we need that visibility in order to make sure that we're capitalizing on the initiatives and getting the return on those investments that we set out to.
And that's a great point. One thing, and I'm going to pass this question on to Kyle as well. One thing it would be interesting to understand is, are you guys seeing any challenges with accessing data? Or most of you mentioned having sales teams and different folks in meetings. Are you showing up to meetings and seeing that, maybe you might have different data sets than your peers? And how are you remedying that if you are having that challenge? Are you guys having any struggles around access to data and making sure that everyone has one source of truth?
Yeah, definitely. I think every company kind of struggles with that at some level or another, and it's not something that we have fully figured out. But we did a large acquisition in 2019, And we're still in the process of integrating that data with our other business lines. And so it is a long journey, and it takes a concerted effort on everybody across the organization to make sure that we get all the data in the right place, integrated, so that we can have quick access to data, and then we can layer on a Tableau or some other visualization tool, maybe it's Power BI, whatever you use, to build dashboards to get that information then to the frontline business owners that need to use that information to make decisions. It's the age-old problem of everybody has a different source of truth, and trying to okay, everybody stop, push your papers to the middle of the table, and we're going to start over. Making sure that everybody's pulling that data from the same source, and then the way that the data is being used makes sense. And that's where I think finance has the ability to add a lot of value when we partner with the businesses, is getting that information into their hands in the most usable and efficient manner possible.
And Stuart, we saw you smiling and nodding when Chris and Kyle was speaking. So I want to turn it over to you and see what those smiles and nods were about.
Yeah, no, definitely. Integrations are interesting, right? So, Mission is 3 companies that have come together, right? So we made, right at the beginning, 3 acquisitions, right? So that's always a struggle, right? You've got 3 separate companies all running on separate tools. And it's all about how do you standardize, right? And for us, it's how do you standardize on tools that effectively run in the cloud, right? So moving the company in the direction of where we need to go, but again, making people feel like they are an individual contributor in that direction is super important, right? So, what is your cloud-based PSA, right? What are your core systems and tools? Like, how do you, as a team, select what those need to be? How do you get people to move to that? Because at the end of the day, standardizing on those tools is super important, because it is going to be producing data and results that you want people to accept because of the tools that you're using and how they've been involved in sort of setting those up, right? So it is an endless struggle to get to a point where effectively what I report out is consistent with what they understand as being, for instance, margin on a specific business unit, right? And the only way that you get there is to standardize across tools and across the entire company. That's certainly something we work very hard in doing, and it's not something that's ever solved. We continue to do it, but it's so very important in terms of sharing real-time information with our company.
And Melissa, I saw you shaking your head as well. So maybe shed some light in here for us also.
Yeah, you can imagine going through a merger of 2 organizations. Yes, all the tools, everyone is not on Zoom anymore. They're on Teams, just at a basic level, right? That's just the beginning of it for your average person. But then you get into the actual, how do you do data analysis? And now we have the question of every single different financial system across every single entity globally. We're going to have it to pivot that to NetSuite. They'd already started going down the path of Workbook, which is a Dell Tech product for project management. And so now we have to figure out, as we're deploying our platform and expanding that, what is it connecting to, and what is the data modeling, which is terrifying for people when you say it. So if you want to make people nervous and throw them on their heels, say data modeling, because then they're like, oh my God, what is that? But the reality is it's just consistency of data globally. When I say, where's the customer, who's the payer, who's the user, and then what are the KPIs, and that's something that we're going to need to continue to revisit as the business changes over time. But right now, at this point in time, what is our short-term, 2-year and 5-year plan? And then what are the pieces of data we need to have? Like Chris was saying, you need to make a new tag for everything, as if you're going to define certain reporting by a new line of business or a new product. And so it's taking where you are right now and making sure you have consistent data so you can actually do something with it, whether it's in Tableau or Excel, wherever you're going to put it. If you don't have the data tags correct, and that's this, even within the AWS environment, talking to DevOps, I'm like, when are you going to tag it by user, by client, so I can do the forecasting of the cost for the full model? And right now we don't need it, but that's the type of discussion that you have to just keep on keeping on to be dynamic and agile with budgeting and forecasting. is realizing the market conditions are changing and the data you need continues to change.
Thank you. Well, we are embarking on towards the end of our conversation here, but I want to tie off this piece. And it sounds as if there's a huge opportunity here for the Office of the CFO, if you're not already doing it, to lead the charge in data analytics, data visualization, and being able to have a data-driven conversation with other business leaders and drive that effort forward to make sure that all the business owners are looking at the right data, and we're not pushing all our paperwork in the middle and just kind of starting all over every time we have a meeting. But it seems like there's a huge opportunity here to be equipped with the right data at the right point to have the right conversations with different business leaders. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation. As we're concluding here, I want to give each one of you a couple minutes for some parting thoughts that you want to leave with the group here. So I'm going to start with you, Kyle. And if you want to give us some parting thoughts, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Thanks, Syesha. And appreciate all the insight from the other panel members today. It's been very informative, and I love it. So I love to learn, and lots to learn from everybody else. I'm always happy to not try to invent the wheel, but rather steal it from one of my colleagues. I just think I think that as I sit back and kind of think about everything that we talked about, I think there is this constant theme that underlied everything, and it's that ability to be agile, to be flexible, to be able to move pretty quickly and adjust. And I think that is a critical component of CFOs today. That as we saw the world change dramatically over the last 12 months, well, business also changed dramatically in a lot of different ways. And I think the people that have been the most successful have been the ones that have been able to, roll with the punches and create insight and add value throughout the process to, kind of understand and see how the company's going to be able to adapt.
Thank you, Kyle. Melissa.
Yeah. So love that we're creating this community, this conversation, being able to share trials and tribulations, ideas we've come up to solve them, and the idea that everyone in their role in finance, it doesn't really matter if you have it in title or not, or in responsibility or not, it behooves everyone to understand what the needs are of the main stakeholders and how that impacts all the other departments, so that sort of as a service provider to the rest of the organization, you can best help everyone, right? So as soon as everyone understands that finance is there to help everyone achieve their goals, then it is a much easier conversation when finance is there to create accountability, right? So I think that's the biggest takeaway. It's something that I've learned, right? Coming in and asking more questions and finding out what everyone else needs gets a lot further towards everyone achieving long-term strategic goals together.
Excellent. Thank you. And Chris.
Yeah, no, again, I appreciate being invited and hearing the group's thoughts. And, I think there's a lot of us out there that have the same questions, specifically on supply chain. So happy to be a part of this. And yeah, again, for me, the biggest thing I can say that's been, successful is trying to put yourselves in the operator's shoes and be that glue that helps each individual department understand the other department's needs and try to provide value that way as a CFO.
Excellent, thank you. Stuart, I'm going to pass the ball to you for closing remarks.
All right, excellent, thank you. Yeah, again, echoing the same point, I appreciate forums like this. Obviously, with everyone being remote, it's a bit of a challenge, but as a CFO, I've always appreciated sharing, right? I'm super interested in knowing what I don't know. And so these forums are great because, to Kyle's point, sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's having a forum to talk about issues that are central to all of us and sharing ideas around how we handle, right? A lot of this comes down to data, right? And certainly that's where mission comes in, not only for us internally, but our customers as well. Mission does this. If you're on-prem and you need to get to the cloud, we help you get to the cloud, right? If you're running in the cloud, how do you run most efficiently in the cloud, right? So part of what we did as a team, and Melissa, you said this perfectly, as a leadership team, it's all about being agile, and for us, it was being agile with respect to what is the pain of the customer and how do we respond to that? Because, sometimes things happen like what happened, and it's, where do you go from here? It's uncharted territory, right? And what we found is being agile and listening to the customer was the best thing we ever could have done. They were running in the cloud, and it was all about, how do I run as cheap as possible in the cloud? How do I become more efficient? And we built product and tools around that. Instant discount program was one. Maybe it's actually purchasing RIs. Like, how do you manage that? Acknowledging the customer had cash constraints. Like, how do you help them purchase reserve instances to optimize their spend? But at the end of the day, it's all about data, right? How do we focus on empowering our businesses to leverage that data, that analytics, that machine learning that's in the cloud? So we provide all of that data engineering, the analytics, the machine learning, and the data science expertise that SMBs like all of you folks require. And it's all about, how do we quickly realize the ROI gains that come from, let's call it, expertly wielded data and analytics. So I appreciate this time in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. And so what I want to do is take the time to, one, thank all of our panelists and let you know how much we appreciate you joining us today. Also thank all of our participants, as I know that an hour out of your day is a lot of time. So we appreciate the time here. Panelists, we appreciate the conversation. And I know we didn't get to some topics, but as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to point out a couple of things. Is one, this will be a series of engagements that you will have with your mission AWS team. The premise here is, what we want to do is to create a culture, create a community that allows the office of the CFO to have these type of conversations in a space where you guys really know each other, you know your business, and you know what data sets that you need access to make business decisions. So we will be continuing to schedule more events for you all to get in the room and have these conversations. As a next step, I wanted to let you know what you can expect from your AWS mission team following this event. You will receive a call or an email from your AWS mission team around cloud financial management and what that means. Particularly what we are thinking about and what we want to do is really have a conversation with you around your data. What are you doing with your data? How are you accessing it? Have you had AWS cost optimization? Are you doing data analytics? And really be able to empower you to have the right conversations at the right levels and put your arms around your data. So with that said, we do have 3 minutes to spare, but I want to go ahead and thank everybody for their time, and thank you for joining, and we'll appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing and talking to each one of you guys in kind.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
I know.